Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something genuinely fascinating, and honestly a little unexpected. We are looking at Pope Leo XIV's 2026 encyclical, Magnifica Humanitas. Now, we hear about AI literally all day long, right? From Silicon Valley developers, venture capitalists, lawmakers, but how often do we step back and view this massive shift through a purely philosophical and humanistic lens? Not very often. So we're going to break down exactly how this 2,000-year-old institution is tackling the absolute cutting edge of the AI revolution, and how it frames the intense collision between human dignity and rapid tech change.
Just to ground us, looking at the official papal crest from the source document really underscores the gravity of the text. When the Vatican drops an encyclical, it's not just a casual press release or a quick op-ed. It is a major, heavily vetted teaching document designed to guide millions of people globally. And this one specifically zeroes in on what it calls the res novae, or the profound new things of our current era. It dives headfirst into digitalization, artificial intelligence, and robotics. It fully recognizes that these tools are actively rewiring how we work, how we communicate, and honestly, how we understand ourselves.
And the text actually skips the small talk completely. Right in paragraph 6, it hits us with this profound question. Where are we going? Toward what goal do we wish to orient ourselves? It acknowledges that we aren't just swapping out our tools, we're living through a massive change of era. Right now, a handful of global players are locked in an AI arms race to control the world's infrastructure. Meanwhile, the rest of us are kind of just watching from the sidelines, adjusting to new algorithms every single day and hoping for the best. But the Pope argues we simply can't afford to avoid these existential questions about our shared direction anymore. Which brings us to a quote that brilliantly captures the modern crisis. Never has humanity had such power over itself. Now, the document is super careful to point out that technology isn't some evil antagonistic force. Human ingenuity has drastically improved our lives for centuries. But the scale and the speed of today's power, it's completely unprecedented. In the past, massive civic innovation was mostly guided by elected governments or public institutions. Today, that power is highly concentrated in the hands of private transnational tech giants. We're talking about corporations with computing power, capital, and global influence that easily dwarf entire sovereign nations. It's a staggering amount of somewhat unchecked dominance, which makes governing it for the common good an absolutely massive challenge.
This leads us right into section 1, titled Babel versus Jerusalem. We're going to look at two powerful biblical images.
What's super fascinating here is how the text uses these ancient metaphors to frame our ultra-modern tech choices. We're essentially forced to choose between two diverging paths. On one side, we have the Babel syndrome. Think of this as the ultimate Silicon Valley blind spot, a project conceived without limits, driven purely by the idolatry of profit. It pushes a digital ecosystem where raw algorithmic efficiency totally crushes individuality, creating echo chambers that demand uniformity. On the flip side, we have the way of Nehemiah. This is a model all about shared responsibility, genuine communion, and actually embracing our human limits instead of trying to engineer our way out of them. It's like a giant puzzle where everyone, scientists, gig workers, civil society, comes together, taking their own section of the wall to build a just and safe community.
Moving smoothly on to section 2, a living social doctrine, where we see how this all builds on a much larger tradition.
Because the church's social doctrine isn't some rigid set of rules handed down from the sky. It's actually a living dialogue with history. There's a famous phrase from Pope Francis highlighted here, time is greater than space. And that perfectly captures the mindset. In an industry famously known for the motto, move fast and break things, this encyclical is literally advocating for slowing down. The church prefers initiating slow, steady processes for the common good over frantically scrambling for quick cultural dominance. The argument here is that truth isn't some digital territory you aggressively defend. It's a common good you have to carefully cultivate and share over time. So, the key takeaway here is that the church positions itself as a precious ally in defending human dignity alongside science. This is not framed as some turf war between ancient religion and modern engineering. The text explicitly respects the autonomy of science. It doesn't claim to know exactly how to code an ethical neural network. That's not its job. Instead, it offers a deeply rooted ethical framework for shared discernment. The goal is to work hand in hand with secular experts, ethicists, and society at large to make sure that as tech advances, it actually serves humanity instead of subjugating us.
Let's transition to section 3, the history of new things, or what they call the res novae. Now, this timeline might actually surprise you. The church has been systematically evaluating massive technological shifts for well over a century. If we look back at 1891, the landmark document Rerum Novarum directly tackled the disruptions of the Industrial Revolution, fiercely defending factory workers against the relentless machinery of the steam engine. Then we see major interventions in 1931, during the global economic crisis, in 1965, engaging with the post-war world, all the way up to Magnifica Humanitas in 2026, addressing large language models and robotics. It's a continuous thread. The institution has constantly adapted its teachings to act as an anchor, protecting workers and communities from the shifting landscape of unbridled industrial and tech power. And no matter the era, whether we're talking about the steam engine or a predictive algorithm, they rely on these exact same core principles. Take subsidiarity, for instance. It's a big word, but it basically just means decisions should always be made at the most local level possible to avoid the extreme centralization of power. In an age of massive AI models controlling global information flows, this is a radical call to keep power in the hands of local communities. Then you add in solidarity, the dignity of work, and fair remuneration. These are the guideposts designed to protect the gig worker driving for an algorithm, or the digital artist whose work was scraped for training data. It's all about ensuring the economy serves the people, not the other way around. Which brings us to the absolute core philosophy of the entire document in Section 4, Defending Human Dignity.
The document defines human dignity as a gift endowed by God that completely precedes and transcends your abilities, your wealth, or your productivity. It aggressively dismantles this insidious modern mindset that your worth is somehow tied to your measurable utility. I mean, think about how algorithmic hiring software today can just instantly trash a resume because the candidate doesn't fit into a pre-calculated efficiency matrix. AI really threatens to amplify this transactional mindset, reducing complex, messy human beings to mere means to an end, or just data points to be optimized. But the encyclical insists absolutely not. Human value is inherent. It simply cannot be calculated by an algorithm.
So to prevent AI from treating us like expendable data, the Pope lays out these specific standards for global discernment. It starts with the dignity of the person, but notice how it extends outward to the universal destination of goods. In plain English, that means the unimaginable wealth and productivity generated by AI needs to actively benefit everyone, not just a handful of Silicon Valley executives and early shareholders. It demands a preferential option for the poor, digital literacy for the vulnerable, and crucially, care for our common home. We can't just ignore the fact that training these massive models requires staggering amounts of water and energy, seriously straining the planet. These aren't just abstract ideas. They are urgent demands for responsible global planning before deploying tech.
Then we get this profoundly countercultural statement. Power is made perfect in weakness. The text specifically warns us against the modern illusion of limitless tech upgrades and the subtle push toward transhumanism. You know, the desire to just engineer away all of our physical and mental limits. In our rush to build perfectly frictionless lives, we forget something crucial. True human fulfillment actually happens when freedom and responsibility intertwine with mutual care. It's about the shared and sometimes really messy process of embracing our vulnerabilities together. Real connection doesn't come from relying on a machine to eliminate all our flaws. It comes from extending grace to one another precisely because of those flaws.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question to chew on. If machines become perfectly efficient, what makes you perfectly human? As artificial intelligence continues to evolve at breakneck speed, taking over cognitive tasks, generating vast amounts of our media, and driving unprecedented global efficiencies, we have to pause and ask ourselves what we are actually optimizing for. Are we just blindly building a modern Tower of Babel, obsessed entirely with unconstrained profit and data? Or are we going to do the really hard, shared, intentional work of building a community where everyone's inherent dignity is fiercely protected? I'll leave you with that thought to consider as we all navigate this digital revolution.